Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Physio Global Podcast. Today is a very special episode because today we are doing a warm-up show of the Pain Science in Motion Congress in Brussels in May of 2026. If you're a researcher or a physical therapist, our guest today needs no introduction, but he deserves one anyways. He is a professor of clinical neuroscience, an officer of the Order of Australia, and quite frankly, he is the man who changed the way the world understands the why behind the ouch. Joining us today from Adelaide, Lorimer Moseley. Lorimer, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Adrian. That's a very generous introduction. Thank you very much.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself for people who might not know you?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm a sort of older middle-aged person who enjoys my life very much. I've got a great job as a clinical neuroscientist and pain and feeling scientist, I guess. I'm sitting here in my house on Kaurna land. Kaurna people have been on this land for 60,000 years, having meetings, and pay my respects to all First Nations people. If there's any First Nations people watching or listening to this, pay my respects to the deep connection and ways of knowing that I'm just starting to understand a little bit more now, which is very exciting. I ride my little e-scooter to work and back through the parklands, and I work in just a fabulous team of anywhere from 20 to 40 researchers, all really serious about trying to reduce the burden of chronic pain, but also other chronic feelings that change the way we behave and reduce our quality of life. That's me.
Yeah, that's nice to hear, Lorimer, and welcome in the show. Let's get into the heart of your keynote lecture on the Congress in Brussels. The title is Extending Modern Pain Science Education to Other Chronic Overprotection Disorders. The talk focuses on taking models for use of chronic pain and applying them elsewhere, specifically to things like PTSD or so, for example. Can you unravel for the listeners what you're going to do on this lecture during the Congress, and what you're going to talk about?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the opportunity. I don't exactly know just yet, but I'll tell you the science behind the intent. So this will be a brand new talk for me. I've been studying chronic pain. I guess pain in general and chronic pain specifically for almost 30 years. And over that time, we've sort of put out there a whole lot of resources that members of the public, patients, clinicians as well, but patients can use to shift their understanding of their situation. And I would like to think that we've been trying to help people shift their understanding towards an understanding that's more aligned with contemporary scientific understanding. I'm a scientist. I'm a card-carrying scientist, and I think it's a great way of generating knowledge. And we've done a lot of work on what happens when people align their understanding with what the scientific method would tell us is an accurate way of understanding. And over that time, probably 10 or 15 years ago, I started to notice emails coming in that really piqued my attention because they weren't about chronic pain. The books were, right? So the classic example would be a book called the Protectometer Handbook. So this is a book giving people a way of understanding complex pain science, and I guess it's somewhere in the journey from explaining pain neuroscience education to what we do now. And I think we published in about 2015. So since then, these emails have come in, and I noticed that people were saying things like, well, I really enjoyed the Protectometer Handbook, but I don't have chronic pain. What I did, they say, I've been experiencing, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder for 20 years. I used this book, but I just crossed out the word pain and I wrote the word fear or horror. And it was great. This book has changed my life. Thank you so much for the work you do. And then those sort of unsolicited emails came in not irregularly, and they would come in around post-traumatic stress disorder, around fatigue, around generalized anxiety disorder. More recently, we've been exploring loneliness, the feeling of loneliness. And we've been learning from the consumers out there that the models that we've been testing in chronic pain, some people have just adapted to these other feelings. And I describe all of those feelings. I think they're feelings that are just extraordinary in their capacity to mold our behavior to keep ourselves safe. And they do that to with great success in an acute situation. But when the feeling persists after the potential benefit of that protective behavior, then the feeling becomes the problem. And I would describe that as a protective feeling that's persisted beyond the adaptive time window for protection. So I call that an overprotection situation. And so we've started now, probably 3 or 4 years ago, more formally investigating these adaptations. So we've done a couple of preliminary trials with post-stroke fatigue with Coralie English up at University of Newcastle. We've started collating a whole lot of data from people with post-COVID, long COVID, post-COVID fatigue, people with loneliness, anxiety, phobia. The depression is the one sort of mental health challenge that I think it should fit, but it's not as easy to fit that into the paradigm. So we haven't really tested that, but it comes under what I would describe as the big six, and of what I use the term the stealth pandemic. I think that we are in trouble with a pandemic in humanity of these feelings, and I call it stealth because they've flown under the radar. They're invisible. They often don't get taken seriously, and yet they are the most disabling health problems we face. So I'll be talking around that stuff. I haven't prepared the talk yet. Anyone who knows me knows that there's no way I'd be preparing this talk to it. But we've certainly done a lot of work around it, and it's all there, ready to stick into a talk. I'm really excited about it because it will be, one of the first times I'm going there. And it might be a bit controversial. I sort of hope it is controversial, because Explain Pain was very controversial. You young people there, you too, you young men, you might not know how controversial it was in 2003 when that book came out and the first trials of intensive pain science or pain neuroscience education were published. It was a real, it wasn't straightforward. So maybe we'll do that. That'll be great.
You are right, because for us it was kind of part of the curriculum. We were pointed towards your book, and I think we both have it in our bookshelves.
Yeah, for sure.
Well done. Well done. Good luck. It's part of the curriculum almost worldwide now, which is quite extraordinary in 22, 23 years. But that doesn't mean it's not controversial. It's still controversial. This idea that shifting understanding of the problem can reduce the problem is still a pretty controversial idea in a lot of quarters.
Yeah, you mentioned about it was a big change back then, right? 20 years ago with the Explain Pain point of view. And now there's still, it's a dynamic process. It's always changing. Just like with the big six you were mentioning about. How do you see it, Lorimer, with the feelings you're talking about, with the loneliness, the fatigue? Is it like it's a pattern of symptoms behind for chronic pain, for example, or are there different subgroups of patients, or is it a combination of all of it all? How do we see it?
I don't know. But I'll tell you what I suspect, and I think I suspect it on pretty good grounds. But I think it's important for me to do my best to describe how I think about these things, because I think about pain, fatigue, thirst, hunger, worry, horror, fear, loneliness, all as feelings that, the way I make sense of it, that are at the end of this very complex system that produces something into consciousness. So I don't really think about loneliness being a cause of chronic pain, because I see it as occurring at the same level of the system. I hope that makes sense. Just in exactly the same way that I never, this is going a long way back into my PhD years, I didn't think about pain causing changes in motor control. There in that sort of late 90s, early 2000s, there's some really exciting work coming out of a few labs around the place, including Paul Hodges' lab. I did my PhD under Paul. I think I was his first or second PhD student, and I'm very proud of that, because he is an extraordinary guy. Right. But one thing that really impressed me about him is, when I turned up to do my PhD, I was thinking, I just don't think this transversus thing could be causing these problems. But I can see that a change in motor control is happening in people with recurrent back pain, even when they're pain-free. But I would say I don't think there's a mechanism in my mind where pain causes the motor control dysfunction, except through a change in volitional behaviour, because I think that's what pain's making you do. And in the same way, I think loneliness will normally make you go and seek out social connection of some description. Fear will make you escape the situation. Thirst will make you have a drink. Hunger will make you eat something. Fatigue will make you lie down. So these feelings that I put them in the same category. What we do notice in people with chronic pain is that they also have a lot of these other comorbidities. They're often also fatigued. They become more anxious. PTSD, pain and trauma come together. And I like to say pain and post-traumatic stress come together. I feel like saying pain and trauma is a little bit like saying, I think it would make more sense to say injury and trauma, because a lot of people who experience trauma don't develop post-traumatic stress. A lot of people who injure themselves don't develop chronic pain. A lot of people who are in horribly psychologically traumatic situations don't necessarily develop these chronic overprotective disorders. So there's a lot of comorbidity that happens, and it's almost like the longer you have one of these, the more and more likely you are to get a mix of them. So going back to your original question, what I think is going on there is much more biological than we might have presumed. And when I say that, I'm quite nervous, because I don't want people to think, oh, so this is just a biomedical model. It's not. I think that, I think all of what happens inside us is the biological event. And I think that I suspect we will start to identify the biomarkers of loneliness and PTSD and chronic pain, and start to conceptualize these things as the language we're using in our grant applications at the moment is as though this bioprotective state that is beautiful when you need protection. And it has all this stuff around it, right? It creates feelings, it creates movement patterns, it changes heart function, cardiovascular function, endocrine, food digestion. Like it's amazing. It's amazing. But for some people, it gets stuck on. It's almost like they get stuck in this bioprotective state. And when we're applying for money, we're calling this the locked bioprotective state. And when we conceptualize that, we can then look at, so what is out there that unlocks this bioprotective state? And there are some clear candidates that have been proven in different parts of this stealth pandemic, the big six. But they often include education, learning. Learning stuff is good for us. Learning seems to help unlock a locked bioprotective state. Doing things, moving, cardiovascular work, strength work, just moving, even imagining moving does stuff. And connecting. And that might be connecting with your what's important to you. It might be connecting with family or friends socially, or what I'm learning more about with your country. And in Australia, when we say country, we mean the dirt and the trees and the air and the waterways and all this rich, unfathomably long history of the Australian Indigenous people, that we're just starting to think, bloody hell, there's some good stuff in this. So anyway, it's a long-winded answer to your question. And I hope that it triggers a bit of excitement, because the health professionals who are best qualified to help people unlock these bioprotective states are the health professionals who can understand how to help people learn, how to help people do, and how to help people connect. I'm a physiotherapist. It's a great skill set to have. It's not the only skill set, but it's a great skill set to have.
Do you think, when you're talking about this, do you think society is ready for this kind of approach to healthcare, to being more holistic and taking all these different aspects of life and trying to get to that base level and trying to influence that? Or are we stuck in a science dogma where everything has to be double-blind researched and proven?
Beautiful question, Adrian. I think society's screaming out for this, but I don't see that dichotomy that you've alluded to between this stuff and, double-blind scientific methods, because I think we should be doing double-blind trials to see if our hypotheses are correct on this. I mean, that's a long way off, and it is a lot of double-blind, randomized controlled trials, but I think we need to do that because there's just too much shonky stuff going on, and I'm always cognizant of thinking we're not just talking. In my view, I'm being pretty speculative here. We're not just talking about the same old stuff, if that makes sense. Like lifestyle medicine, it's not. I don't feel like it's quite that simple. We know that telling people to exercise more doesn't mean they're going to exercise more. So, telling people to eat in Australia was the 5 and 2. You got to have 5 servings of vegetables and 2 of fruit every day. No one does that. I'm a big vegetable eater, and cheap as I don't do that. So there's all these barriers to lifestyle medicine. But what I think the chronic pain journey has taught us really clearly is that when we can actually facilitate learning in our patients, when we can actually achieve that, it's really hard, but when we can and people flip their understanding of the problem, then truly transformative outcomes emerge. And I think the evidence is really clear on this. The average impact of a good pain education intervention is good. It's not amazing. But when we dive down into what are the changes that best relate to pain and disability reduction, it's changes in understanding of the problem. And in the real world, what do people who have recovered tell us? So people who have recovered from chronic pain, and in the work we've done, we've got data from almost 2,000 people who have recovered. About a quarter of those people haven't recovered from chronic pain. They've recovered from one of these other conditions as their primary condition. But they tell us the same sort of things. They tell us learning how the system worked was a game changer for me. Learning that my feeling is a protective feeling was a game changer. Learning that my system was overprotecting me. So even though I felt like I was broken, or I felt like I was totally alone, or I felt like I was in a life-threatening situation, I could understand that feeling is not quite right. I'm not broken. I'm not completely socially disconnected. So these are the things that we're learning from people who have recovered. And when we look at the people who haven't recovered, they don't tell us this stuff. So I think it's important. And I think my position is well grounded on that. There are very vocal critics, obviously, who say this is a load of bollocks. But I think the evidence is very compelling.
Yeah, very interesting. Interesting to hear, Lorimer. You talked about before the growth of comorbidities with our patients, and the complexity is growing as well from our patients we're seeing every day in the clinical practice. And the demanding is growing as well for getting some information and education about it by the patients. Do we need to start over the learning patients not on the moment they are seeing in the clinical practice, but even before, just like the primary school or secondary school in the prevention case? When is the right moment to start over with learning?
Yeah, when is the right moment? I don't know, but there are groups around the world, I think, who are taking on that challenge. That's a significant challenge. We have people in our own research group, Sarah Woolwork, who's looking particularly at people who are between 3 and 8 years old. How do they understand these things, and how does their understanding of, say, how pain works predict their response to injury, and then ultimately predict how things turn out later? What are the role? Melanie Knoll is doing great work with collaborators in Canada looking at adverse and positive childhood experiences and how they might relate to resilience and recovery from painful situations. Josh Pate, Beck Fechner are doing great work in schools. There are other people doing work in schools. We are very interested in what we would describe as whole of community education around pain, and we're doing some really big projects funded by our Australian government, particularly in rural and regional areas in Australia. And those projects are motivated by the conviction or the hypothesis that if this was the bell curve of the way people understand how these things work, if we can just shift the whole bell curve a little bit, then we should be able to reduce the number of people who end up down this descending spiral of physical, economic, social, psychological disadvantage with these chronic comorbidities and overprotection. We should be able to drop that a bit, and we don't have to drop it much, but to offer great economic savings and great societal benefit. So we're focusing on what we describe as whole of community intervention. And we're really interested in rural and regional Australia because access is more difficult and the problem is worse. It's 1 in 4 people who live outside of our major cities has a quality of life reduced by chronic pain. So that's why we started a thing called Pain Revolution. I don't know if you've heard of Pain Revolution in Belgium, but look it up, do a search, Pain Revolution. It's a cool initiative. We run programs for rural and regional Australia, 250 free community events every year. We've raised €500,000 worth of funds to provide scholarships for health professionals. And now we're training non-health professionals to teach their communities about how pain works. So these are social workers, personal trainers, Aboriginal peer workers, disability support workers, teaching their communities around campfires and in aged care facilities and stuff like that. So we're really on the same page as your question there. And we're doing it here. There are people doing it in the Netherlands. I know Remco Soy is doing a great study in northern Germany and in the Netherlands, I think. Paul McRyan in the UK. So people are doing this stuff.
It's a great initiative. Good to hear about it. Yeah, awesome.
Do you have any questions, Adrian, for Lorimer as well?
That's a little miscommunication from our side. I do. Let me just look them up. Yeah, I did. If pain is ultimately an output of the brain, what do you think the biggest misunderstanding about pain is that it keeps persisting under physiotherapists, or is my question wrong from the beginning?
Well, I guess, people I have a great deal of respect for really don't like me suggesting pain is an output of the brain, and I can understand why they don't like that, because I think it's technically it's difficult to hold that up in a if we're really fussy about the way we talk about things. So I can understand that, but it makes a lot of sense to consumers, and I don't think it's very harmful. So I'm still happy to say phrases like, the brain makes pain. Technically, what I'm thinking when I say that is pain emerges in some amazingly mysterious and magical event like consciousness through a particular pattern of neural activity that is not necessarily consistent, but behaviorally it always seems to happen it often happens at sensible times. So I'm not going to say that, right? I'm going to say the brain makes pain. So in contrast to that, your question was about, so what are the sort of main concepts that that I think is what you're asking, that I think are wrong, but are held on to by, for example, physiotherapists, but a lot of people. I think the stubborn one that is most problematic according to our data is that pain is generated at a tissue site when the tissue is damaged, and it travels to the brain, and it provides, in Patrick Wall's words, are you guys too young to know about Patrick Wall? Melzack and Wall, the gut control theory.
Oh yes, we have heard about that. Yes.
Yeah. So Patrick Wall was like the grandparent of pain science, and in his words, the mislabeling of nociceptors as pain fibers was not an elegant simplification, but a trivial, an unfortunate trivialization of pain or something like that. They're probably not his exact words, but it's always held itself deep in my understanding of how these things are. So I think what I believe is wrong is that pain is a message that travels from broken tissues and is just there to provide feedback on how healthy your tissues are or not. I think that's wrong, and I think I can understand why it's so attractive, but I think it does make recovery difficult once the biological processes cut in to make that link between tissues in danger and pain more and more tenuous. And if we think that pain is a signal coming from broken tissues, we've got nowhere to go. If the tissues are well or missing, the person's an idiot, and I certainly don't think that that's the case. I think that model's wrong, and I think that model does not serve physiotherapists and clinicians the world over. But I have a deep respect for how difficult it is to let go of that, not just because it feels right. You feel it in a certain body part and you put a mechanical load on the body part and the pain goes up. So that sort of feels right. But there are so many reasons we believe the things we believe. They're not just because of data. They're because of our own values and our own vulnerabilities and constraints and opportunities. And I think we've got a medical system that makes it a bit easier to hold on to that view. And I think we've got a social system that makes it a bit easier. So yeah, totally get it that people hang on to those views. So I'm nervous about answering those questions because I can have strong opinions on whether something is scientifically accurate or not, but it doesn't mean I have strong condemnation of people holding those views.
Thank you for that elaborate answer. Yeah, very, very insightful.
Yeah, we're heading to the final stage of the podcast, Lorimer. So for me, one final question for you. I don't know if Adrian has one question at all now.
You go first.
Right. If you're looking out for the future with pain science, what's your point of view? Where we're heading up to? It's a question from my side. So.
Yeah. I don't know. I think we are getting better at creating the spaces and strategies and attitudes to help people avoid developing chronic pain and to help people recover from chronic pain. I think that's the direction we're moving in. Having said that, there is just so much going on the planet at the moment that I think will put great burden on biological systems that have evolved over human history, animal history, to protect us. I think there are a lot of reasons that a lot of people should be on high alert at the moment, and I think that is mediated by biological systems that will make chronic pain more likely, will make PTSD more likely, generalized anxiety more likely, loneliness, and it'll probably make inflammatory diseases and chronic diseases in general more likely. So, you know, if I could sort of parcel that question into saying, if there was nothing else going on in the world, none of the shit that's going on, and people getting hammered, right, incredible threat in everyday life, none of that was going on, I think we'd keep moving towards better outcomes and fewer people developing chronic pain and more people recovering from it. But all that other stuff is going on. You know, the environmental load that's affecting us, you know, the ridiculous stuff going on geopolitically. People are frightened for their life in whatever reason. So I don't know what the future will be. I mean, sounds really crass, but for someone who really enjoys studying this stuff and learning how it works, I don't think we're going to solve the problem before I've finished trying to solve it.
That's a great answer for the question. So
yeah, I think the whole situation with social media and you being constantly directed, your attention is being grabbed by everyone. I can totally imagine how that fuels this system, and I'm very thankful to have learned that it's basically it translates from pain to fear to loneliness to anxiety to all those basic human emotions that kind of gives me a better understanding of how everything is falling into place and why we're seeing the changes in society and the way we treat each other. And yeah, for me, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying today.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. I mean, I do want to make it really clear that we are at the beginning of this journey. You know, we haven't proven that stuff, but they're very solid hypotheses that we're now starting to test.
All right. Yeah, I think for this one, Lorimer, it's thank you for having you in our show, in our episode for today. We're going to share with the early researchers for the Congress of Pain and Emotions and Pain Science and Emotion in Brussels, and our followers as well from Physio Global platform. So thanks for this one. And I think it's very insightful to listen about your point of view and the things you learned and still learning, and it's for us very valuable as well. So thanks for that one.
That's great. It's a real pleasure. Congratulations on the podcast, and I'll see you in Brussels.
Yeah, see you there.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Excellent.
Bye.
Ciao.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Physio Global. Would you like to discover more episodes? Then visit our website at physioglobal.nl. If you have a question or would like to get in touch, please send an email to info@physioglobal.nl or visit the contact page on our website. And of course, don't forget to follow us on social media. Physio Global, bringing the world of physiotherapy to you.